You know what blows my mind? How to Win Friends and Influence People has sold over 30 million copies worldwide. Yet most people completely misunderstand its core message about genuine human connection.
That's fascinating, especially considering it was written during the Great Depression, when people were struggling with many of the same isolation issues we see today.
Well, what makes Carnegie's work so remarkable is how he approached these universal challenges. Instead of offering quick fixes, he dug deep into human psychology. His research showed that criticism literally activates the same brain regions as physical pain.
That explains why his first principle about avoiding criticism is so powerful, but isn't it incredibly difficult to implement in real life?
That's exactly why I love his Abraham Lincoln example. Here's Lincoln dealing with the Civil War, writing these heated letters to his generals, but never sending them. Instead, he found ways to channel that frustration productively. Studies show this kind of emotional regulation can reduce workplace conflicts by up to 70%.
The way he connects that to giving sincere appreciation is brilliant. Recent psychology studies have shown that genuine praise activates the same reward centers in our brain as receiving money.
And that ties perfectly into his insights about memory and recognition. When Carnegie talks about a person's name being the sweetest sound, he's tapping into something neurologists now understand about personal recognition and trust building in the brain.
Speaking of trust building, what do you make of his principles for making people genuinely like you? They seem almost countercultural in our age of personal branding and social media influence.
Well, that's what makes them so powerful today. In an era where the average person spends over 2 hours daily on social media, Carnegie's emphasis on genuine listening and authentic interest stands out even more. Research shows only about 10% of people actually practice active listening.
You know what's interesting? His section on persuasion seems to anticipate modern negotiation theory by decades.
Exactly right, especially his principle about avoiding arguments. Modern conflict resolution studies show that when people feel attacked, their ability to process new information drops by almost 50%. Carnegie understood this intuitively.
The way he connects that to leadership principles is remarkable, particularly starting with praise before criticism.
There's fascinating research backing this up. Studies show that high-performing teams need a praise-to-criticism ratio of about 5:1 to maintain optimal performance. Carnegie was way ahead of his time in understanding this dynamic.
That really highlights how his principles work across all types of relationships, doesn't it?
Well, that's because he wasn't just writing a business book. He was exploring fundamental human psychology. Modern neuroscience has validated many of his insights about how people process information and form connections.
The practical application of these principles seems more relevant than ever in our increasingly digital world.
Absolutely right. And here's what's fascinating. Studies show that despite our technological advances, face-to-face requests are still 34 times more successful than emails. Carnegie's principles about personal connection aren't just nice ideas. They're backed by hard data.
That really puts his work in a new light, doesn't it? Not just as a self-help book, but as a pioneer in understanding human behavior.
Well, consider this. Carnegie was teaching emotional intelligence decades before the term was coined. His work predated positive psychology by almost 60 years, yet he identified many of the same principles researchers now validate through scientific studies.
The enduring relevance of his message is pretty remarkable.
And that might be his greatest legacy, showing us that despite all our technological advances, the fundamental principles of human connection remain unchanged. Modern research continues to validate his core message. Authentic relationships are built on genuine interest, active listening, and sincere appreciation.